Hi, my name is Carrie, and I'm going to be talking about anxiety and arousal in sports. And we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first thing we're going to talk about is anxiety. What is anxiety? So it is defined as an emotion or a perceived threat. And it is psychological emotion that is always negative. There's nothing positive about anxiety. It is always negative. So it affects competition, self-perception, motivation, and cooperation. So there all are ways to cope with anxiety, and there are ways to keep it down so that it won't affect certain things. If it gets too high, then it's going to affect all of the things that I've listed. So there's two types of anxiety. There's state, which is a temporary feeling in the right now situations, and there is trait, which is a stable personality trait. So an example of state would be right before a game, you're getting that anxious feeling or a performance, and that is the state anxiety that you are experiencing. A trait is exactly what it sounds like. It's a personality trait. It's a stable feeling all the time. It's a personality trait. And they say people who suffer from trait anxiety usually suffer from state, which is pretty obvious because if you have an anxiety problem and it's a part of who you are, then you're probably going to suffer from state as well. So let's go ahead and continue. So my focus is anxiety and arousal in youth. So it's important, especially when they're youth, they are younger, so we need to recognize the symptoms of anxiety, and that's parents, teachers, coaches, because it's important that we can teach them coping mechanisms to learn how to keep their anxiety levels down. I mean, at a certain age, we're not going to be able to teach that, but in the adolescence years, we definitely are able to teach that so that when they go into high school or they go into college or professional sports, that they are able to cope with that anxiety to keep it down, to give optimal performance for them. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so youth in sports. Okay, so Anshel states that 7 or 8 years or younger, that they should not compete in competitive sports. He was saying this because they do not understand the importance and the benefits of sports. I mean, a 7 or 8-year-old, they have an immature cognitive development with a me first mentality. As you can see, if you have kids or if you're uncle or aunt, you know the difference of a 7 or 8-year-old compared to a 12 or 13-year-old. There's a big difference in their cognitive development, and they're going to understand the importance of what sports is. So I'm not saying that it's negative to have kids in sports. It's more for the parent, I think. I think it's great for motor skills, and space awareness for the children, but you also have to understand that they're not going to understand the importance of it. They understand it more as being a game or just going out and playing. And they're probably having a good time, but they don't understand the importance of that. And anxiety affects, in sports, motivations and cooperations and competition. So motivations are driven by external and internal motivations. So what makes them play? Why do they play? Do they play for themselves? Do they play for their parents? What external factors are driving them, and what are the internal factors that is inside of them? What's affecting them? So competition and cooperation tie together. For young kids, they don't understand the cooperating with one another, but as they get older, they will understand that teamwork is cooperation in competition. If you want to win, you got to cooperate with one another. So they tie in together. So like on here, I put, when a gifted team dedicates itself to unselfish trust and combines instinct with boldness and effort, it is ready to climb. And that's a perfect depiction of what sports is. It is not about just the star player, because the star player may be an amazing athlete, but when you put them all together and they all work together, that's what cooperation is about, and that's what makes some players win. I mean, look at the Lakers. Kobe is an amazing player, and he's an MVP, but then without the team, I mean, look, they've lost so many things. So it doesn't matter if you're just the star player. All right, so we're going to talk about arousal, okay, in sports. Arousal means to stir to action, to excite. It is a positive or negative cognitive effect. And it is separated into 3 levels of arousal: low, optimal, and high. So low arousal is not concentrated or paying attention. Secondly, this is where peak performance is, and it is one is focused in taking in what is important. Thirdly, high arousal is when one is over-focused and focusing on an object or goal. So you don't want to be in low, you don't want to be in high. You want to be in optimal. That gives you peak performance. So they put here, optimal arousal equals peak performance. And just like in a game, if people are chanting, the crowd is chanting and all those kind of things, that's going to bring optimal arousal it's going to increase the arousal for the players. That makes it exciting because the crowd is excited to see them. Or when they do the little hut thing, or I don't really watch too much sports, but things that would increase arousal, the coach encouraging positive feedback. That is so important, especially in youth. It is so important to give positive feedback and encouragement, because I think that's what drives them, hearing that they've done a good job, or but I hear so many stories about coaches just putting youth down. And whether it's physical educators, coaches, teachers, it's important that we lift them up and we give positive corrective feedback, not negative feedback, because that discourages them, that has an impact on their self-perception, and it's probably going to make them drop out of sports and not even continue in that sports or physical activity. So it's so important to increase arousal and by giving positive feedback and encouragement, but not to the point where it goes too high. This next slide shows, I did a graph here of the difference of low to high. So low is sleep, boredom, mild alertness, and you can see at peak performance, optimal level. So as soon as you go into high, stress, and then anxiety comes back into play, and panic. So like we said, arousal can be negative or positive, depending where your arousal levels are. You want to be in the middle, optimal arousal, because as soon as you go to high, that anxiety comes right back and you become unfocused, and you're not going to have your peak performance. So the sociological impact. I read an article by Kenneth Macri, and he quotes, "Our society places value on competition, therefore value is placed on sports and their participants." Sports and anxiety sports in society are tied together. And I think that sports teach teamwork, positive attitudes. It teaches space awareness. I think that youth in sports, I did read an article that said youth in sports leads to community involvement. What you do, you see all these, whether it's youth sports, high school, they're usually linked with other stuff, helping the elderly or anything like that. And it teaches them good communication skills and community involvement, which can last a lifetime. And it also teaches youth right and wrong. And I think that is so important, that our youth understand the importance of right and wrong, because some of them, they don't, so it teaches them discipline and all that good stuff. So the negative is, I think, bad coaching and too much parent involvement. I see, like I said in my last slide, that bad coaching can lead to negative feelings and so many negative impacts on youth, definitely. And I'm not just saying youth, I think even in elite players in any range, but I think especially in youth, because that's the basis. That's the basis of where everything starts. And when you already approach it with a negative aspect, for them, that's what they're going to see, and they're never going to want to try it again, because they already have a negative perception of that. Also, too much parent involvement. It's important that we, as parents, I know we care about our children, but we don't need to be involved in every little section. We can miss a practice. We need to let our kids learn independence. We need to let them learn failure, rejection, or if they're winning or they're overcoming or they've received something, that's awesome. But I think that they need to sometimes learn it by themselves. For us, coming on the sidelines and yelling at the umpire for a bad call, or the coach, that isn't the best way, and that decreases arousal, especially for the player. He or she needs to learn rejection. If they're not working their hardest, maybe they're going to be not the first person called out. So it's important that they learn that on their own, because that's what life's all about. There's going to be rejection. There's going to be winning times. There's going to be so many things, but they need to learn how to cope with those feelings as well. And when there's too much parent involvement, it doesn't happen, unfortunately. So it's important that we do that. So the research study that I did, let me look it up here. It was a scholarly journal of education and practice, and it was called Sports Achievement Motivation and Sports Competition Anxiety, a Relationship Study. So it ties achievement motivation and competition anxiety, and it described how the two affect each other. In sports, the performance level is highly leveled by physiological and psychological factors. They used the Sports Competition Anxiety Test, which is also known as the SCAT, and the Sports Achievement Motivation Test to retrieve data. It states that achievement motivation is one of the key factors of sports performance. The purpose of the study was to analyze the correlation between competitive trait anxiety and achievement motivation in inter-university level sports. And the research outcome actually showed that higher experienced players showed lower levels of anxiety than that of lower experienced players showed higher levels of anxiety, which is pretty self-explanatory when you think about it. That's why you see elite players. They are elite players because they know how to cope with their anxiety and they know how to keep it lower so that they have peak performance. The lower experienced players, they're youth. They're the people who are learning sports, who are playing with it and learning, and are just now learning to cope with anxiety. And some athletes they're never able to learn it, and it brings the choke about, where they end up messing up. So it's so crucial that the youth learn how to cope with anxiety if they want to have an elite career. So that's what this study showed. That higher experienced players had lower anxiety levels and lower experienced players had higher anxiety levels. So my last slide is the Christian worldview. I think that anxiety plays a pivotal role in life. I think not just in sports, but it plays it in your walk with God. I think that sometimes anxiety can cripple us if we're not careful. If we don't trust God, sometimes anxiety can pull us back from going out and stepping forward and getting out of our comfort zone. So I also believe that sports brings discipline, coping mechanisms, teamwork, and those are all things that you can use in your everyday life, in work, when youth get older and they have to get a career. Like, that is definitely going to help them. And it's a great platform to be a witness. I think that when you're in sports and you're an athlete, even in high school, people look at you. You have the term, I did a discussion regarding the word jock. And jock is considered so many negative and positive in so many different ways. But when you're an athlete in high school, people look up to you. So it's a platform to be a witness and to be an example. And it's so important that we use your gifts to glorify God. If you're not using it for the right things, you need to. All of it is used for the glory of God. He gives and he takes away. And right here, Colossians 3:23, it states, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord." And these are my references. So I hope you guys enjoyed my presentation on anxiety and arousal, and I hope if you guys have any questions, we have it in our book, but I hope I was able to depict the difference of those and how they affect sports performance. Thank you.